Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Sean Bellerby, entrepreneur, speaker, business leader, and athlete. He spent 12 years in market-leading software companies and founded his first company at 32. And he's a living example of the power of personal transformation. I'm super excited because I think everyone is searching for a bigger purpose and wants to enjoy their life while doing something meaningful. So with that, welcome, Sean. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, Brett, thanks so much for having me here today. I really, really appreciate it. We've got a lot of common ground, so I'm excited for the chat.
Yeah, I'm excited too. You have a fascinating background. So, I mean, there's a ton of stuff that I want to ask you about, but let's start off with your personal story. Can you share your background and how you started your career?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I spent over 12 years in the big tech companies. Prior to that, I'd started my own company as well, and that company was known as a pioneer in the snow sports industry. I'm an accomplished snowboarder, as well as overcame my own personal challenges. But the most interesting thing about this story, in terms of how I got my start in big tech, was that I have an older brother who's 12 years older than me, and I got back from a snowboard trip one year. And he's like, a friend of mine, she's working for some software company, and they've just opened an office in Sydney, and they need a young guy to do all the young guy stuff, right? Like probably get dry cleaning and lunches and just all those things. And he goes, why don't you go and talk to them and just, see what you think? It's maybe a good idea, before you go to university and to work for a little bit. I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. So I went down there and they gave me a job, and I started out at this software company that was called Mercury Interactive. And it turned out it was the fastest growing software company in the world at the time. Like I had no idea for the first 6 months I was there what I'd really just joined, but I knew I was very lucky, and it just worked out. I remember one time they turned around and said, hey, we think you're going to be good in sales, and someone just left, so would you mind doing this job? And then they just kept adding to the role. I think I was about 24 or thereabouts when I left that company. Hewlett Packard actually ended up buying that company for about $4.5 billion way back then. That was in about 2005. So, some say equivalent to about a $20 billion outcome in today's day and age. But it was a really great ride. I often say a lot of my soul family was working at Mercury during that time. I have still got excellent friendships, business relationships, from people I worked with at that business, and some of the people I love most in life, I met at that company back in 2002, I think is when I joined it.
That's very cool. I mean, I have to say, I have a sort of a parallel experience in the sense that company wasn't as large, but I was not actually a big fan of the whole corporate America here
Right.
thing here in the U.S. because my father had worked in insurance for 25 years, and in that industry, and when he was coming up through the sort of ranks or whatever, the whole idea back then was, if you gave your career to a company, they would take care of you. And after 25 years, literally on his 25th anniversary, his boss was coming down to lay him off.
No way.
And his buddies found out about it, and they called him and they said, you can't come down today.
Right.
We're giving him a cake, we're giving him a watch, the old stereotypical things. And so the guy waited 2 weeks, came down and laid him off. And so it soured me as a kid seeing my father go through this, who I knew was loyal to the company, was always good about doing all these things. And so it's sort of the rules of the game had changed. So I was not optimistic about working for other people, but I landed this job in the late 90s, so a few years prior to when you did. And it was a IT consulting company, but we had consultants all over the country at a lot of these startups and everything else. It was the .com era.
Right.
And so everything was really exciting, but it absolutely restored my faith in working for a company and working with other people, because like you said, the people that I met and the experiences that we had and the way this company treated people was
Mm,
so good that so it's amazing to me how those formative experiences can really have an impact on the way that you see life and your whole trajectory. And especially like in your case where they're giving you additional responsibility, they could just sit you in sort of your silo and say just do your thing and be quiet, and eventually you'd get burned out and you'd leave. But by giving you additional things and letting you continue to grow and expand inside the role,
hmm.
they're getting the best out of you, but they're also, investing in you, which is really great. So I think that's a powerful way, to start a career for sure. So go ahead.
Super powerful way to start a career. I often wonder where I would be without that company. I was on a trajectory to go and study law at university, and I never made it to university to study law. I since went and did 2 degrees, but law was not one of them. And I've had a wonderful career in the big tech business, and it all started at that company with this beautiful office that we had hanging over Sydney Harbour, which, because it was my first job, when I left Mercury, I went into my next place and it's like, why don't we have an office hanging over Sydney Harbour? Right. I sort of thought that all companies should have offices hanging over Sydney Harbour, and all companies should have expensive wine in the boardroom, and all companies should have equally as high caliber people working there. It was a very special place. It was a very collaborative environment, and to the success of the business, the people there loved helping each other,
Yeah.
and then the next thing, and not only helping each other, they loved helping their customers. So for me, as a very young man, to be in an environment with the people that were at the top of the game in the software business, and some of those people are still at the top of the game in the big tech business, right? And to have those people around me from the get-go, and teach me, look after your colleagues, help them out, help your customers out, do the right thing with your customers, help them get to their goals, right? And by doing so, realize your own along the way, and that's just how it unfolded. And for me, I've always taken that into the companies where I have been an employee, as well as into the businesses that I've started. Help each other, help your customers, and customer centricity and teams been a big part the whole way through.
Yeah. And when you can create a culture like that, that's
Hmm.
just generally the kind of people you attract. You attract people that want to, go by the sort of philosophy that the high tide rises all ships. Everybody wants to help each other out because you feel like you're in it together. You're all pulling in the same direction. The importance of corporate culture and something like that is so important. If you'd have
Hmm.
that experience young is really, really great as well. So I know not everything in your life has always been easy. And I know
Hmm.
you also had to overcome some challenges along the way. Are you open to
Sure.
sharing with us some of the details about that?
Absolutely. Where would you like to start? So, yeah.
I guess whatever you think has made either the biggest obstacle for you, or maybe the thing that's had the biggest impact on your life from being able to overcome it.
Hmm. Sure. So through my 20s, I was drinking too much, and that's just the truth of the matter. I was drinking too much, and that was one of the big blockers for me that I had to overcome to create a great life for myself. Right now, I'm not a big I am person, so I don't consider myself an alcoholic. And to each their own. If people want to label themselves that, I think that there are a lot of people out there that some of their habits, whether it be alcohol or other things, are just in the road of them getting to their fullest potential. So that was my experience. I was in a place. I was in a big tech company at the time, and I just realized that if I don't change this pattern, I'm not gonna create a great life for myself. And I knew I could live a great life. I knew that I could create something really beautiful for myself. But I knew that if I didn't tackle this particular personal challenge, that I'm not going to get there. So I embarked on a journey to tackle that, and I was really lucky. I got to work with a wonderful meditation based change coach by the name of Justine Ruzchek. And Justine, unfortunately, is no longer with us. It is the week of 8 years ago where she was killed in a police shooting up in Minneapolis.
Wow.
Total tragedy and disaster, and a big loss for me and many others. And that was 8 years ago now, on the 15th of July of 2017. So, anyways, I was so lucky that I got to do all my work with Justine, and I remember turning up and talking to Justine. A friend of mine had recommended I call her, so I did, and told her what was going on. And she just said, "Look, come around here, and I'll explain a few things." And what she helped me do, she helped me see. She goes, "Look, you're not addicted to alcohol, right? What you are addicted to is an emotion: guilt, shame, and fear. And you're carrying all that around with you every day, and your body is trying to get as much of that as it can, because that's what it's used to survive, right? And it thinks if you're starving it on those emotions, it thinks it's not going to survive. So the quickest way for it to get guilt, shame, and fear is to what? Tell him to pick up that drink, right? And then the floods the body with the emotions that it's changed its receptor sites to receive over the years, so that it gets its fix, so to say, of the emotions that it's used to survive. And so how we did that was, Justine used, and I now use as well, meditation as a tool to clear out emotions from the past, things that are, we don't want to carry around with us. And that's the definition of living in the past. The definition of living in the past is any emotion, that happened yesterday that you're bringing into the present, right? That's not serving you, perhaps, right? Is living in the past. So some people, and for me, I'll just give my own example in this case. I was carrying around all this stuff from being, in my childhood, and it was showing up in my 20s, and I had to free myself from that. And the second I did that, it was night and day. So, I want to say, you don't have to spend 4 years in therapy anymore trying to solve this. You don't have to go to AA meetings. You don't have to go to rehabs, but what you do need to do is get yourself, a guide or a coach, and unravel it all with them. And the difference for me was, was within weeks. And I remember feeling like this was probably, I could nearly tell you that I could nearly, I can describe what the afternoon looked like. It was a beautiful sunny day in Sydney, and I was walking on Manly Beach, which is where I used to live in Sydney. And the ocean there is beautiful, and the sun was shining, and I could hear the birds chirping. And for the first time, I think, in my life, I remember smiling and feeling joy. And I was maybe 29 or 30 at the time. And I remember, I'm 42 now, so this is a long time ago, right? And I remember smiling, and I remember feeling, wow, I'm actually meant to feel good. Life's meant to feel good to me. And my whole life, I had been taught life's not meant to feel good for you. You're going to sacrifice, and life's hard, and life's this and that. So I really had to relearn all those programs. And it entirely changed. It entirely changed my life, and certainly made it easier to free myself from patterns, in my case, alcohol, that was holding me back.
That's, that's remarkable in terms of, I mean, just the whole string of events. The fact that, first off, you were able to find the person who was able to, because I think that's a challenge, right? Even if we want to change, there are people that want to change. There's people that want to improve their lives, but they're not really sure how to go about it. Mm-hmm. And even if they do, who's to say they get the right person that matches their energy, that's the right personality, has the right tools in the toolkit and experience to be able to do it. But also, just the fact that then you were able to go through and sort of realize it. And I think, there has to be so much power being able to go from one state to the other, because then you
Hmm.
also have the power to be able to reflect, and you can recognize how wrong, right, the other way of living or the other way of thinking was. So when you think about this, or when you sort of project this out and think about other people, do you think that for most people, when they're sort of held back, or they're not realizing their dreams or living their best life, do you think it's those kinds of blockages and negative associations, or is it more complex than that?
I think a lot of it comes down to mindset, right? And a lot of it comes down to how we're thinking on a daily basis, right? How we're thinking and how we're feeling and how we're behaving, right? So, what our state of mind is, and then what our state of being is once we're marrying up how we're thinking, how we're feeling, and behaving, right? So I think a lot of it comes down to being mindful of the where you're putting your energy, right? And if you're putting your energy, and thoughts consume energy, so if your energy is going into thoughts that are not creating what you want, right? Or your thoughts are in the past, or your thoughts are in some sort of adverse event, or some sort of negative feeling that you have about an experience or a person or an outcome, or something, right? If that's where your energy is, then it's not in creating the life you want. So I think it's super important to be very mindful of our thoughts.
Yeah, I fully agree. I'm not always, full disclosure, but I
Right.
recognize that, for me anyway, and I think this is pretty common, if I don't sort of consciously monitor that and pay attention to it, I tend to skew negative. So
Hmm.
if I don't purposely put positive things in my mind, or think about what I want as opposed to what I don't, what I
Mm.
find is, in general, I find myself thinking about what the worst scenario could be, how to avoid that, and so it's all fear based. It's all,
Right.
negative, and sort of, pain avoidance type of thing, as
Hmm.
opposed to, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I want to accomplish, and this is what I need to be holding in my mind. And I'm somebody who, has been in, or interested in, or around, personal development, self-improvement, all that stuff for decades. And even still, I don't find that my natural pattern is such that, if I'm not vigilant about that and paying attention, it's very easy for those things to creep in. Do you think that that's pretty common?
100%. And I want to say, none of us are walking on water, right? So we're going to have days where we do get stuck in the what ifs, right? And that's going to happen, right? But there are things that we can do to minimize some of that. And I'll just give an example. Like, I know I'm picking on alcohol a lot, in this particular interview, but you know, I've got friends that'll go out and they'll get wasted on a Friday night, and they're spending 3 or 4 days in negativity thereafter, right? And how the brain works, right, is that the neurons that fire together wire together. So if you're constantly feeding those neuro pathways negative thoughts, it's just going to continue to build up like a big copper pipe, right? So the aim of the game is actually breaking down that copper wiring, and you do that with good lifestyle choices. You do it with you do it by doing the things that are true to you. Then there are other practices like meditation, of course, is a great one for that. But the other side of the practice that's very healthy and very good, and not as spoken about as meditation, is just doing things that are very grounding for you. The more grounded we are, the easier it is for us to attract our best life, right? So the more grounded we are, the easier that things are going to flow to us. So I always encourage people to be getting really clear on what are things in my life, because it's different for everyone, that are grounding for me. And for me, it's surfing or snowboarding or yoga or walking my dog or spending time with my friends. Grounding to me is not hanging out in a bar, right? So it just comes down to those little practices that you can find, that are certainly very helpful.
And so, to take it a step further, let's say that somebody says, "Okay, I really want to do something for me that's fulfilling. I want to spend my life doing things that are meaningful. I really want to tap into that. I want to find what my deeper purpose is, but I don't know what it is, and I'm anxious to discover it." Are there
Mm.
steps they can take? Are there things that you recommend that they do to begin that process?
Hmm. For sure. And it just depends where each individual is at, right? So the most common place where people are at is that they're in a 9 to 5, they're feeling unfulfilled, um, you know, they're feeling sluggish and uninspired, and perhaps even their friends and family think they're depressed. Like that's the most common place where people are, right? And they sort of start to get a, hey, maybe I could live a bigger life, or maybe there is something bigger out there for me, right? And that's step one, when you start to feel that way and you start to wonder what that life might look like, because it's going to look very different from the one you're in right now, right? So once you sort of have that call and you start entertaining that thought and go, I'd like to explore this a little, the following call to action is unravel whatever it is you need to unravel with a coach, because there's going to be stuff from how you grew up, the school you went to, something that happened in a job, like all of these life experiences, have contributed to the present day. So there's going to be some stuff to unravel. You want to unravel all that. And once you're free from all of that, the ideas and the inspiration and the wow, like, we are here to be happy, we're here to be healthy, we're here to live a great life that is fun and enjoyable, and that's it. And as soon as you're in a place where you can see that and go, wow, like, I buy into this is exactly how life's meant to be, you'll start to get intuitive hits on how that life looks for you. And for me, I go, okay, great, like, I love to surf, I love to snowboard, so everything I create in my life empowers me to do more of that. It's really not much more difficult than that, right? It's like, great. So the businesses I create empower me, for example, when I started Go Snow, to do more snowboarding, and in fact help others do more snowboarding or more skiing, right? Help them do things that they love to do, but help me live the life I want to live too, right? And so it's about then designing and creating your life in and around what you love. And it's really not too much more difficult than that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems very simple. I think, the challenge a lot of people have is, you can have an idea, but then you also have to take steps in order to really, sort of flesh it all out and figure out
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it is that you want, get as specific and clear about those kinds of things. So that way it's easier to hold it in your mind. The more
Right.
vague an idea is, the harder it is to zero in on it, because can't imagine it. You can't picture it. Once you've got the sort of that visual for you that you could just keep popping into your mind, I think it's easier to keep repeating that and have the positive music playing instead of the depressing negative stuff. So,
Right.
um, are
And
there? Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, all yours.
I was just going to ask. I'm curious about. So obviously, staying grounded, doing things that, and I, by the way, fully buy into that. I just spent 8 days, 9 days with my family in Scotland. My older son graduated from university, and I have to say, just being out in nature there. I mean, we did the graduation
Mm.
stuff, but then we did some hiking and some things like that. We're not crazy outdoors people, but just did things, and just to feel like in touch with nature a little bit, and be out in the elements and stuff like that. There's definitely something very grounding about that, and it sort of centers you. It makes you feel very connected in a way that it's very easy on a daily basis when we're surrounded by technology and home offices and all these other kinds of things, and internet connections to allow us to be able to communicate. It's easy to lose sight of that kind of stuff. And so I fully, embrace that as well. But are there particular ideas or ways that, let's say I'm at my desk, right? I can't get out right now to go do something that's going to ground me immediately, but I'm feeling a little bit down or negative. Are there things that I can do to try to make myself feel more positive, even in times of struggle, if I don't feel great about where my life is right now?
For sure. So the one of the stories that I love to share. So the first thing is that we want to find work that inspires us, right? So we want to be doing something that we find inspiring. And even if you're in a 9 to 5 and you're working a job that you don't really enjoy, you can still find a way to create something that inspires you while you're in that job, right? So one example I like to give is a friend of mine. She's in one of the tech companies, and she's in one of the tech companies, and I don't want to give the tech companies a bagging here, because this is not what this is about, right? So, but it just turns out that the tech companies are great, and I love them, and I had a beautiful experience in them, though. This one particular friend of mine, she is in a tech company, and she was talking to me the other day. She's like, I'd really like to help people with their finances. I'm like, well, why don't you start doing that now? Because she feels unfulfilled in the role that she's in, which doesn't surprise me, because she's been doing the same job for 15 years, right? It's probably got nothing to do with the tech company, but more to the fact that you've been doing the same thing over and over and over again for 15 years. Of course, that's going to be unfulfilling at some point, right? So she works from home, which is a huge bonus, right? Obviously, there are the downsides of working from home too. Sometimes you feel like you're at home looking at the same four walls every day, and the same screen and this and that, right? But she does work from home, and that means that she has got some time that she can put to creating some sort of offering that does feel really good to her, and that is inspiring for her, and that can start to generate consistent monthly income while she is in a 9 to 5. So first things first is find work and do work that you find inspiring, right? And even while in the 9 to 5, you can figure out, you can find a way to do something, make a contribution somehow to in the direction to that. The second thing I like to share is, if you're in a place and you are in, a headspin or a funk, or whatever you want to call it, and you just know that, hey, I'm not feeling good today, take the afternoon off, take the day off, right? And go and do something you enjoy. That is the number easiest, best way to solve for something that is spiraling, is just go straight to enjoyment. And I remember in 2020, when I was dealing with COVID and an investor-backed company and all sorts of fun things, that was just not an ideal situation to be in, right? At a time when everything was shut down, and it was very difficult. And I remember walking through that time period, and I remember one afternoon I was having a particularly difficult time, and it's like, it's a beautiful sunny afternoon. I'm going to go for a surf, right? Just because I knew I can sit at my desk and I can be miserable and think about all this bad stuff that may or may not happen, right? Or I can go and enjoy this beautiful sunny afternoon and be in the water that I love. So I went and did that. And on this one particular day, I remember walking down the beach. I like to surf at Manhattan Beach. I live in Santa Monica. So I get in my car and I drive down to Manhattan Beach, and there's this surf spot called El Porto that I love. And I remember getting out of the car, walking across the beach to the spot I always the spot I always put my towel, where I always drop my towel. And there's this beautiful girl, like just sitting there, sort of X marks the spot type thing, right? And so, wow, this girl's really pretty. What's she doing here on her own, you know? And I didn't think anything of it because I thought, you know what, I'll just get in the surf because, you know, that's what I'm here to do. So dropped my stuff nearby and then just got in the ocean. I didn't even think more about it, you know, like I just thought the boyfriend must be in the surf or something. And I stayed in the ocean for about an hour and a half. And when I got out of the water, I noticed she was still there. And I'm like, well, geez, that's odd. What's going on? And she smiled at me. And I knew that was my cue to ask a couple of questions. And then we dated for 3 years. So all from a place of I could sit at my desk and worry about it, or I can get outside and enjoy my life and see what, you know, see what source energy can yield to me. And, you know, and I was lucky to have, you know, to have this particular beautiful girl in my life, you know, for the following 3 years.
That's amazing. I mean, it's funny because oftentimes, like we look at these circumstances and we think about, you know, the luck of it, but you have to wonder sometimes if there's other forces, you know,
There's
sort of
definitely other
intervening.
forces.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
There's
Um,
definitely other sources, right?
well, and I know to your point, you know, for me, if I'm the days where I'm the least motivated to want to work out, you know, for me, I like weightlifting, and so
Mm,
um, the days that I feel the least like doing it are the days that matters the most because when I go and I work out, I feel so much better the whole rest of the day, and I'm
right.
always thankful and grateful that I did it even
Hmm.
though it's a struggle and I'm thinking in the morning, you know what, maybe I'll just skip it today. I'm kind of tired. Maybe, you know, and so it is amazing how sort of just sometimes changing our environment or changing the dynamic or changing our energy or doing something just to make a change there can have a big impact.
Hmm.
And I know, you know, this is a great segue in terms of people. Obviously, no matter what we do, no matter how much of a lone wolf we might think we are, life
Hmm.
doesn't really work as a solo sport, right? We're all connected and involved with other people and a lot of the things that we accomplish or do. And so, you know, they always say, right, over and over again, that it's super important who you surround yourself with because that's going to help you or it's going to hinder you. If you surround yourself with
100%.
the right people, then it's going to lift you up. And if you have the wrong people, it's going to drag you down. So if we want to attract the right people and the right circumstances into our lives,
Hmm.
what's the best way to do that?
Ooh, great question. So the the best way to do that is the number one thing to do here is if we've decided we want to attract, so we're going, you know, like I want to attract some different experiences, right? And when we're doing that, we're going, okay, great. Like it'd be really, wouldn't it be nice if I could meet a cool new business partner, or wouldn't it be nice if I could meet a new romantic partner, and or wouldn't it be nice if someone that could help me with this particular thing or shared this vision would just flow into my experience, right? It's all energy, and what that means is that like attracts like, right? So there's a whole talk in and around, or there's a whole, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, there's a whole theme in and around leveling up, right? And to level up, what we need to actually be doing, it's leveling up how we're thinking, it's leveling up how we're feeling, and it's leveling up how we're behaving, right? Like, so if you're wanting to attract new people in your life, and perhaps the people that you've previously been hanging out with are hanging out in bars all through the weekend, then that might be something you stop doing, right? And start to just these simple little things to go, okay, great. Well, you know, I might stop doing that, and therefore I might need to address these particular programs and patterns and level up all that side of me, so it's easier for me to attract new experiences. But this is where it becomes an inside game, where it becomes in actually getting really interested, right, in what's called our subconscious system, right, and all of the programs, the patterns, the behaviors, you know, the habits, everything that's in that, and it actually makes up 95%, right, of our state of being. So all of that's on autopilot. And what we need to do is start creating that change inside us. And when we do start to embark on that work, we will find, if we're subscribing to and believing that there are greater forces at play, and I believe that there is an energy that loves us, that will bring us anything we want, but it wants us to pay attention, and it wants us to be present, and it wants us to enjoy our lives, right? So by starting to do the work to be free from anything that's in the road of that, you will find that you start to attract experiences into your life that are far greater than perhaps you previously experienced.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And I do think, like you said, it is super important to consider if you want to make a change, to try to look at all the things in your life, from everything from the way that you think to the behaviors that you have, the habits that you, because I think a lot of us do a lot of the things we do sort of automatically. I mean, we've probably all had that experience where you're driving down the highway or the freeway or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you just get off the exit and you realize, wait a minute, I'm going in the wrong place, because it's a place you've been so many times that you're on autopilot. You're not even consciously thinking about where you're going.
Right.
So you're going to
Yes.
the place you normally go instead of the place you're supposed to be going. And I think, like you said, we got to sort of disengage the autopilot and say, okay, I'm gonna drive this baby for a little bit here and figure out
Mm-hmm.
what it is that I want to do, where I want to go, what I want my life to look like, and all that, and be a little bit conscious and deliberate and intentional about it. And I think there's definitely a lot of power in that. So let's say someone's trying to do this. They want to
Mm-hmm.
transform their life. Don't feel happy. They're looking for that better thing. Um, how can somebody know if they start to take up some of these habits, do some of these things? How can they tell if it's working? And how do they know, like, how long the process will typically take?
Right. So the first way to know if something's working or not is just how am I feeling every day, right? Like it's just how am I feeling? If I'm waking up and I'm jumping out of bed and I'm feeling inspired and I'm feeling good, then that's the that's the first thing to become aware of, is just being aware of how we're actually feeling. And if we're finding we're in a place that, hey, I'm not feeling good about this, or I'm not feeling good about that, then that's often the first indication that it might be something to take take a closer look at. And what I've seen sometimes also, uh, the forces out there, or source energy, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, but there is some sort of higher power there looking out for you, right? And it's trying to get your attention sometimes. So sometimes the wake up prods and the wake up calls that people get will get louder and louder and louder, and until they pay attention to, hey, I got to make a change here.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it is important sometimes to follow our instinct, even if it seems counterintuitive or it seems like something,
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, what I've discovered, and I didn't recognize this when I was young, but as I've gotten older, is I have discovered that when I lean into things and it is something that I can tell I'm meant to do it, because like you said, you get a level of fulfillment about it. You get a sense of it's those activities that you're engaged in where you don't recognize the time, right? The
Mm.
time just passes because you enjoy it so much, and when you're doing it, you feel so good. It's one of the things, to be honest, I mean, it's one of the reasons I started a podcast. I love the
Right.
opportunity to talk to people and learn about your experience and be able to share that with everybody else. I think it's so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I actually wish I did a lot sooner. But no matter how tired I am, or how long a day I've had, or whatever else, as soon as we flip on the camera and I got somebody to talk to, like I light up. I find it
Right.
very fulfilling and really exciting, and a total blast. And so yeah, and if I compare that to some of the other things I've done, throughout my career and throughout my life, where it was sort of, oh, I got to go do this again. you,
Right.
you can feel a visceral difference there for sure. So, all right. So
Yeah.
where can people find you, find your products, find your services, connect with you?
Yeah. So head on over to my website, which is manifestwithsean.com. You can get a free workbook there. I have two different program offerings. So I have my purpose to profit workshop, which helps highly skilled individuals turn their expertise into purpose-driven businesses that generate consistent monthly income, that create a lot of joy and a lot of freedom, in their lives, as well as I have my alcohol freedom technique, which is something I use in a program I help for people to live an alcohol-free lifestyle. So head on over to the website. It's manifestwithsean.com. Can also be found on Instagram at Sean Bellerby.
Perfect. Thanks for that. All right. I have one last question I've got to ask because I always want to know what everyone's going to say. And that's, what's your
Right.
number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
You got to do what's true to you. That's going to take the hustle and the sacrifice out of everything. That's going to give you inspiration to pick up the phone and go, I'm going to call this person today because I know that what I'm doing is being really useful to others, and I know that what I'm doing, it's helping me, create the life I want. So you just got to find what's true to you, and you got to be authentic. We didn't talk much about that on the podcast today, though. I know, Brett, that you've spoke about that, in other calls. But it's such an important thing. Authenticity is just, you got to be true to yourself. You've got to be true to your customers, and you've got to create things that are true to you as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I've actually said, I believe we're sort of entering or already in the authenticity age, because I think with all this technology and AI and all these other crazy things going on, they're all great tools and there's a purpose and a place for everything, but it doesn't replace a human being. AI doesn't have experiences that they can share, right? And the value in your life when you're connecting with other people is those shared experiences, the things that you can talk about that make people realize, hey, we have something in common. I'm not alone in this journey, right? Other people have been where I am and they've come out the other side of it. So there's things that I can learn from that. And so, yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I think that when you get up in the morning and the thing that you're going to do is an effort, then that, somebody you're competing against is jumping out of bed, excited to do it. Right. So you got to be that person. If you want to be successful and you want to make it to what you want, whatever goals you've got set, you've got to find that thing for you that you don't need an alarm clock. You're jumping out of bed. You can't wait to get back to doing what you're doing, because then all the people that are begrudgingly doing it are competing with you and they have no chance. Right. And so that's really powerful.
Yeah. And it's way easier than people think. For me, I'm about to spend 3 weeks, nearly 4 weeks in August, snowboarding every day down in New Zealand. It's the last certification that I have to do. Not have to do. I mean, I'm stoked to do it. And once it's all said and done, it's the equivalent to having a master's degree in snowboarding. And I remember someone once saying to me, once you've done your full certification, you're known as a really great snowboarder. So I'm absolutely rapt to go and complete that. So for me, I'm jumping out of bed every day going, get these things done, right? So I can go and do what's true to me all of August. And that's the point I want to make. It's easier than people think when you're following what's true to you.
Awesome. All right, with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Sean, so much for sharing all your insights, great tips with us. Visit manifestwithsean.com to get your free workbook and book a call with him. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember, everybody, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optYOUmize.
Brett, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.